funny story. Arif, you followed me on Twitter. I didn't know you followed me. I posted something on Twitter and I was like, are there any like actually fucking good football podcasts? And like, I think Arif, you responded to me with like a frowny face or something. It's like, because I knew your work. I'd listened to you on QAA. I'd read some of your stuff with like The Athletic, and I knew from just like Seahawks stuff. It's like, fuck, I can't believe this guy follows me. I actually like his work. That's so embarrassing. But I was like, really, I was like talking shit about Barstool or whatever. Cause like there really aren't.
Like, if I was like legitimately upset, you gotta understand, I'm from Minnesota. If I was like legitimately upset, I would have bottled it up and kept it inside. And not mentioned it.
Yeah, you can't feel pain. But I just mean like, there really aren't. I can't think of really. I'm sure there are probably some we're gonna get corrected on for this because I'm just assuming this is a cold open now. But like, I don't know if there are any like really good like like a ton of like great
I was
leftist.
just on and maybe that's like a way for me to compliment myself backward. But like, no, I was just a guest on the Distraction podcast over the Defector with Drew McGarry and David Roth. And, that's like a little bit more broad ranging than just football, but like they're primarily like football fans. So
Defector, the last good website.
I went to their I went to their holiday party last night.
Oh, yeah.
They had great hors d'oeuvres. I'll tell you that much. They may barely make enough money to stay afloat, but they definitely make enough money to have like mushroom skewers.
They can throw a goddamn party. They know how to hang out. But I mean, no, I'm sure we'll get into this, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of thoughts on this too. And we've definitely touched on this on the show before, where it's a lot of these like spaces, like sports spaces. And like, not that the left should occupy this space, but like the like gambling space, all of these like different spheres of content that exist that aren't just purely political are basically ran by like Barstool is a great example that you mentioned, Caleb. Like they're vaguely not even just centrist, they're just inherently reactionary, right-leaning organizations from top to bottom, and that really does influence a lot of like the way the online sphere functions.
There's like a couple of Barstool podcasts. I guess you could say like, pardon my take, they're like vaguely left or whatever. That's like the only one that I really can stomach at this point. I do like PFT. I think he's funny, and whatever. That's like it's an okay show. But they don't really. I mean, they don't talk about that stuff. They are pretty much strictly in the game. Okay. So cold open, we have done that. Welcome to Western Kabuki. I am joined every week by my co-host June. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I want more billionaires to take over more companies. I think everything should actually just be owned by one person. I'm sick of options. I'm sick of different people having influence. I just want one person to own everything and just get it over with. I'm done with this. That's
true.
We're done.
I'm with it. Alex, how you doing, pal?
Good. I always like, as is well established on the show, I'm not a sports guy, but there's like no greater joy in my life than to learn about something from people who are passionate about it, because it just like, it's very easy to get drawn in when people care about stuff. So it's like nice to talk about sports with people who like actually have opinions about it, as opposed to just like, I hope the Lions win.
I hope they throw that dang ball well today. Shit.
That was my Thanksgiving, was a bunch of people saying, I hope the Lions win. And I was like, okay, guys, I don't care about that.
Oh, that's right, because you're
great
from,
news.
You're from Lions country.
Yep.
Yeah, Lions are good this year. Lions are great this year. Okay. This week we are joined by my friend and one of my favorite content creators, Arif Hasan. How you doing, pal?
I'm good. I really appreciate that you just lied about me. That was awesome.
No, I'm not kidding. That story I told you, like, when I first knew that you like followed me on Twitter, I was like so fucking embarrassed because I was like, oh man, I actually like this guy. Like, fucking embarrassing, man. Arif
embarrassing,
Hasan,
being honest and espousing your appreciation for someone. Cringe.
So cringe, dude. I am made of corn. Arif Hasan is an NFL writer. We're going to get into some of Arif's history. Some of you may know that Arif and I also co-host a podcast with friend of the show, Ed Zitron, called 60-Minute Drill. We're kind of oscillating back and forth between just kind of casually yapping and goofing between more serious stuff like we did a little hour and a half or so on like Pat Tillman's history and stuff like that. And so we're kind of trying to kind of occupy that cultural political space on the left from the left talking about football. But a lot of the time it's really just like we'll talk, and then Ed would be like, the goddamn Raiders are ruining my fucking life.
So great, dude.
Yeah, it's very funny.
And to go back to Alex, that's like whenever in the past we've done like Super Bowl episodes, which we've done 2 on this show in the past. My favorite times are when we have had Ed on for them. And we've had Ed on both. I think Arif, we had you on for the most recent one that we did last year. But my favorite is, as someone who also knows next to nothing about sports, is just hearing Ed give himself an aneurysm over his team. Yeah, it's
the funniest thing in the world to hear a British man, just the dour British man,
right,
like talking about how the Raiders are ruining his life. The funniest moment that we've had this entire season was when we did like a mailbag, and somebody was like, Ed, like, you're not from the States. Like, you could cheer for any team. How did you decide on the Raiders? And it describes about how like he got into the Raiders because he was a poor immigrant and it was like the only like team that he could afford to like buy tickets for. It was just so good. We were just like roasting him. Like, I think Arif, the comment he made, was like, he became a Raiders fan because of market conditions.
This is Biden's America at work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is very funny.
Inflation would have saved him, though, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's so fucking funny because it's true. Like, I believe and I'm not doxing him or anything. He's talked about this. I believe he went to Penn. He could have chose the Steelers, and he's lived all over. He could have, I think he at one point lived in the Carolinas, and he's lived all over the states. He's lived in New York. He could have chose any NFL team, and he's stuck with the fucking Raiders. And now now there's the part of his DNA. And
he's in too deep. The bits are too strong. They run in his blood. Like he likes showing up to harass fellow Raiders fans that are as miserable as him. And you can't like take that away anymore, right? That's just who he is.
Yeah.
But before that just reminded me of a story. Some of my friends, I was busy. I didn't end up going to this game, but a group of friends it went to the White Sox game, the baseball team, the White Sox in Chicago. They were at the game where if they lost, it would have been like historically like the White Sox were going to become at this game if they lost. Recent this year, like historically, like the worst team in terms of, I think it was like amount of losses in a season just in history. And the crowd, they ended up winning that game, and the crowd of White Sox fans booed. They're like, no, fuck you, fuck you. We should have lost. We should have made history tonight, which is so fucking awesome.
Like a record in the NFL, like, goes back to like 1960. It's like an 80-year thing. For the White Sox in MLB, it goes back to the 19th century. Like, those are the records you're breaking.
150-year-old records. They had tablets. They were scrolling on tablets then.
The NFL, what are we, 17 games? How many games are in baseball now?
162.
162. Yeah. So it's like a lot harder to be that shitty at baseball.
And oh boy, they did it. They just didn't do it at that game. They ended up doing it just like a week later.
Yeah. You just had to believe.
Yeah. And people were cheering at that game. People were like, yeah, we did it. They're the worst.
We did it, Reddit.
Okay. Let's lock in. Arif, you are currently working on a book, which is going to be the subject of this episode. That is the relationship between football and capitalism. Let's can we hear, I guess, your elevator pitch?
Yeah, no, for sure. So the history of football is intertwined with the history of capitalism, as is like any cultural institution in the United States. But the thing that I found interesting was how football operates as an excellent microcosm of the way that contemporary politics and economics in the United States is played out. Football has labor crises every 10 years on the dot. Like, it is designed in the way that the contract structures work, right? Football is entwined into our political system through the use of like subsidy systems, right? It really interrogates our relationship to like free market economics and what we think of in terms of like how we support billionaires and stuff like that. In every sense of the word, football is one of the biggest elements of our culture, and the way that it operates, I think, kind of reveals the way that capitalism operates. And it's always nice to take a look at it from the outside, because I think we always can engage in better reflective analysis when we're not looking at our own situation, but we're looking at an alternate situation. We're looking at from the outside looking in, and then we can kind of relate it back to ourselves. So the nature of the relationship between labor and management in football, that's a public fight. Whereas the fight that you have with your boss, not usually a public fight. Hopefully much more often it will be, but it usually isn't, right? The forced patriotism that we see in NFL games, now we know funded by the Department of Defense, like that's a very public thing, and it kind of makes us question about the way that our culture is produced, not just like in the United States, but like globally. And so, in every step of the way, from football's relationship to imperialism and Indian boarding schools in like the 19th century, all the way up to the football's relationship with the military, cultural production, and how we tend to position ourselves as management, even when we ourselves are labor in these public fights, kind of informs the way that the most popular televised event every single year, gets played out in front of us. Because as a reminder, football, if you take a look at the 100 most watched broadcasts in any single year, 93 of them are football. It is a really important cultural product that like people on the left should not ignore.
Yeah. Obviously, I've not read the book because it does not yet exist, but reading your document, one of the things that you said was you formerly were a beat writer for the Minnesota Vikings. Mm-hmm. And you said in your document, the cultural attitude around Donald Trump's first presidency was very divisive in a way that you don't believe exists now.
Yeah. When the 2016 election happened, you walked into a locker room and players were like stunned. Not every player, but there was a deep divide between black players and white players in locker rooms, where white players who typically come from like very conservative backgrounds, they tend to come from rural backgrounds. Obviously, all of these come with exceptions, and they tend to be culturally, on the right. White players and black players had very difficult interpretations of, the rise of Donald Trump in 2016. And so it divided locker rooms in a way that, like, I don't think any other cultural event recently has. But the 2024 election, not nearly as much. I mean, some players celebrated, some players kind of were depressed, but you didn't feel it walking into a locker room. There wasn't an air of like awkward silence or anything like that. It was just like, hey, today's another day. We got to get back to work.
What do you attribute that to?
I mean, some of it's just like the normalization of Donald Trump and his politics. We were exposed to 4 years of him as, governing president, and we got exposed. Like, he's constantly covered in the news, every single thing he did. And as much as like we make fun of liberals for being like, this is not normal, right? Like they're right. It's fucking crazy. Yeah. But like being constantly exposed to that, and then also like football players occupy like a really interesting segment in society where many of them are quite moneyed, right? They're very rich because they're playing professional football, but they also like suffer from a lot of lack of privilege that kind of has been built in throughout their life. So outside of a football environment, they're a lot less socially capable in their circles to get things done. And I think that, and that's not like their fault, right? Like no one taught them how to interview for a job or write a resume, right? Because they were on the practice field.
I mean, in a lot of cases, football players don't even get like a normal high school education.
Yeah, not a normal high school education, not a normal college education. And so outside of the football arena, they're actually really disadvantaged, which is actually one of the reasons that we see so many stories about football players going broke after, they
crashing out, going broke. Yeah.
Yeah. But, a lot of these kind of, privileges and disadvantages that, again, are unique to football players, they're at a crossroads there. And I think that they maybe found that the nature of a Donald Trump presidency, despite all of these problems associated with it, kind of helped them in terms of class position is the wrong word. People will be very particular about how we define class, but like in their income tax bracket, right? Like it was very helpful for a lot of them in ways that maybe they didn't anticipate, or it didn't harm them in ways that it harmed poor Black people, right? And so I think that was some of it. I think some of it is the normalization. And I think that, the fact that Trump, was stopped from doing a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do, which I don't think like people like realize like all the shit that he wanted to do that was stopped. Like he wanted to eliminate fucking food stamps. He didn't get to do it, right? So like I think that a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do was, inhibited in some way. And a lot of the other stuff
Muslim ban is one that you talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Muslim ban was one where he wanted to ban all Muslims, and he was like, "Hey, Rudy Giuliani," which sure, fucking
classic smart guy to go to.
Yeah, right. Hey, Rudy, how do I do this? And Rudy tried to craft the most like legally viable way to do it, so that because you can't like if we're following the law, which ostensibly we are, you can't just like ban Muslims. That is not just illegal, it's unconstitutional. But you can craft a policy that targets Muslims, which in theory, I think, God, it's been a while since I've taken like constitutional law courses, but like in theory, I think it violates, what is it, the Lemon test, like de jure discrimination versus de facto discrimination. De facto discrimination is when discrimination occurs by design, but is not embedded in the text of a law. And that's what this is. But as the courts have grown more conservative, they've gone a little bit more friendly to things like de facto discrimination that target, people without it being explicit about it. Like, when Ben Shapiro does a shitty there's no such thing as systemic racism because there are no laws targeting Black people. What he means is that there aren't any active laws that are being enforced that use the words Black people in them, right? Mm-hmm. Where, like, obviously people who talk about systemic discrimination, that's not what they're fucking talking about. And that's kind of a good example of this is the Muslim ban where, Giuliani was like, okay, well, we'll identify countries that we will argue pose a significant threat to American national security interests, and then will ban, first just ban outright immigrants from coming to those countries, and then create like a special visa waiver system or whatever. And these countries all happen to be like Muslim majority countries. And so that's kind of how you do it. But like, let's say you're like a Muslim immigrant who was born in France, it wouldn't really capture you in the same way. So a good portion of that, it went back and forth in the courts. The initial one was struck down. A good portion of that was kind of mediated and watered down. But like that's how something like that would get stopped in the previous Trump presidency. So we didn't see like the worst of what he wanted to do. Yeah, what's up?
Now, like in the locker rooms, and I think it's the lens through which you're kind of viewing the American populace in a sense. The normalization of Trump is there. Maybe the alarm isn't quite as what it was in 2016. But something you said earlier about the courts are more amenable to this kind of thing now, it's like worse than it would have been in 2016 because he has the institutional power to actually do this kind of thing now.
Yeah, and that's something I've been thinking a lot about just for a lot of reasons, is it feels, compared to 2016, the court system is a lot more dire compared to then, where it's like like the courts are just over, like Supreme Court, state level, every level. The right has dominated the courts in a way that like it doesn't feel like liberals really have an answer for this. There's not really like
there's
anything
no
that anyone
liberal Federalist Society.
Exactly, because a lot of this stems from the Federalist Society's strategy. It's been like a probably longer than 20-year long strategy at this point that has finally come to fruition, where the right has full control, basically. At least that's what it feels like, full control on every level of the court.
There is a subheader in this document. The Democrats are bad at politics.
Yeah. I totally agree. They're so bad.
How do they fit into this? Particularly, I mean, it's tied into football if you can, but just what we're talking about in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's just primarily like their inability to kind of reach people where they're at, or even understand where people are at, and kind of craft a message or a policy plan. And policy plan's even like the wrong word because people don't really vote for policies, but craft a message around kind of what their pain points are, right? And when they craft a message, they act in contradiction to that message a lot. So like, so the piece that you're referring to, the neoliberalism piece, it talks about how Democrats were pretty confident that they'd get the Latino vote. And they weren't really wrestling with the fact that they actually deported more people than Trump did. So if you take a look at deportations, Obama deported more people than Bush, right? which isn't a huge surprise. Like Bush really did attempt to court Latino voters in a way that I think like no other Republican, presidential candidates ever tried. So like that's not as much of a surprise. But then you take a look at, the number of deportations that occurred under Trump, and then you take a look at the number of deportations that occurred under Biden. Biden deported more people per year than Trump did. In fact, Trump instituted a rule in the very last year of his presidency to, as a result of like, the COVID powers he was granted essentially, to accelerate deportations, and Biden used it more aggressively than Trump ever did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great example of just like how horrible Democratic politicians are at this. And to go back to Biden, there was a clip, I think it was this morning, that I saw this today, where he was talking at a press conference, probably just journalists somewhere. I'm not too sure the context of it, but he was talking about Trump basically just like the direction he's going to take things in. And Joe Biden at one point was talking about how like, Donald Trump, he knows how to like market things. He put his name on those checks during COVID. And then he was like, I didn't do that when I did the American Rescue Passage. And then he just like tapped his forehead and he was like, and he was like, I'm stupid. He was basically like, I'm stupid for not doing that. Like I didn't put my name on it. I'm really fucking stupid for that. And it's like, thankfully he learned the problem that these Democrats do not know how to market their own strategies to actual voters, but it's always way too late that they learn these things. Because like Biden, the Democrats already lost, but he finally just learned that lesson that Trump should have been teaching us 8 years ago, that you need to market your strategy to voters in a way that will actually get into voters' heads, not policy, not graphs. People are not going to look at these graphs. There's not like a Will Stancil answer for making people view enough of the correct graphs,
Yeah.
Looking at graphs is not going to like win people over. It's marketing yourself in a way that will actually appeal to people. And sadly, Trump knows how to do that. Democrats in the current era ran by the like consultant class that are currently running things just don't know how to do that.
Yeah, no, it like a really good example of like one area where they really could have taken advantage of, I wouldn't even say accidental marketing, but like the way a marketing dynamic plays out is Obamacare, right? Like they let, the Republicans define what that means to the public when you had the first step taken care of for you. It's called Obamacare. Now all you have to do is talk about how fucking awesome it is, which it's not great, but like, you know what I mean, right? Like,
yeah, it's there.
Yeah, it's there. And so like Trump talked about the Trump checks, and then he was the only one that talked about the Trump checks. And so he got to define what it means. And it's like a two-step process, right? Like one, you have to attach yourself to the thing. And then two, you have to define the values of the thing. This is like brand marketing 101, right? Like the Nike swoosh doesn't have any meaning until Nike fills it with meaning, right? And so the Democrats will very often not create a signifier to fill with meaning in the first place. So like the infrastructure bills or the jobs bills, whatever, like those have like very boring names. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say my eyes are glazing over just listening to you say that.
Yeah.
Lame.
That's why they always give them acronym names, It's like
right, yeah, but like sorry, IRA, which already is an acronym a lot of people use for much cooler shit. Versus
investing, of course.
Right, versus like the Patriot Act. That's like a way better like what are you, against patriotism? Fuck you. He should have called it Biden's Bridges, Like he's building bridges.
That's
Biden's
true.
Bridges.
Fuck. Oh god, they should hire you. Holy shit.
Yeah, I would
so much better.
I would love $600,000 to come up with names like Biden's Bridges. Like, yeah, but like the one instance where like someone did that work for them and called it Obamacare, they just couldn't. They couldn't do it. Like if you like, and this is still true actually. Like if you poll people on what they feel about the ACA, right? They love it. They love the ACA. They love not being kicked off the insurance until they're 26. They love state exchanges. They love that there's a subsidy that occasionally goes away.
Pre-existing conditions are gone.
Right. Pre-existing conditions, right? They love that shit, right? Obamacare, they fucking hate Obamacare. It's the same thing, right? But they didn't do the work to fill Obamacare with me. The only people using the term Obamacare were people who hated Obama, right? And so whenever you hear about Obamacare, it's like, your premiums are going up. You know whose fault that is? Fucking Obama.
Well, right? Dude, he got your ass.
I mean, did you see all those all those screenshots after the election of people saying like, I'm really into Trump. He's going to get rid of Obamacare, and their friends saying, "Hey, dude, Obamacare is your health insurance," and then being like, no,
"Yeah, I was going to bring that up."
Yeah,
there was like that. There was like screenshots of that, and then there were like at the same time Google searches. What is Obamacare and like what is ACA? Like people were like after Trump won, like wait, what?
Even
what
like,
are these?
What is a tariff? Which I actually like.
Yeah, that was the biggest one.
Yeah. Like, part of me is just like, God, fucking, that's so fucking stupid. But part of me is just like, you know what? Fine. Like, yeah, sure, I learned what a tariff was in high school. Maybe I just had a better high school. Like, I can't, it's hard to just be mad at people all the time. And you just, it's better to like figure out like, wait, why don't these people not know what a tariff is? And I'm like, wait, I know why people don't know what a tariff is. The Democrats didn't fucking tell them.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
There was there's a chronic thing, especially I think in this last election. I think people in the past, Democrats in the past, probably did this a little bit better, like Obama. But there was a lack of Kamala and Biden before her to not respond to any of these attacks. I think, I mean, there's a million examples we can give of this, of just Kamala ignoring these attacks and just trying to get on to like the next graph that she wants to show you. But there was like the biggest one, I think, that a lot of people saw all the time, especially during sports, specifically to wrap it back into sports. There was the ad that was playing a lot. That was like, I forget the title of the ad, but it was the one where it would frame Kamala as like, she's for they, them. Donald Trump is for you, or something like that. And it's like that was playing before these sports games, all of these sports events, like baseball games, like all of this shit. Like it was just blasting in front of people. And there was no response from that ad, from the Kamala campaign, other than to step away from trans people and queer people in general. Like there was no positive or attacking response to that at all.
It was so crazy too, because the Democrats just let the narrative get shifted, bringing this back to sports for a second. Of like, oh, trans athletes in high schools. You're talking about like 60 people.
Yeah, it's
you know what I'm saying? Of like,
right.
what are we even doing? Or like the trans healthcare for prisoners, or that's taxpayer supported. You're talking about something that probably has never even fucking happened, and you're letting them dog walk you on that.
Yeah, like that's both of those topics combined accumulate maybe 200 people out of 300 million. Like, yes. We gotta chill. We gotta, the Democrats need to understand they need to ride these narratives.
I read an article like a couple days ago, and I'm trying to find it and I can't, but it was someone saying like, you know, I asked a bunch of Democratic operatives,
yes.
I asked a bunch of Democratic operatives to outline the Democrat position on trans people, and the response was, to a person, good question. Like no one can articulate it.
Fucking Christ!
There was no internal response. They just
nervously give you a thumbs up.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, like we saw that when Kamala was like, "I'll follow the law." Like, fucking thanks. Right?
Atrocious answer. Atrocious.
But yeah, no, like a lot of it just is kind of like an inability to take advantage of like big cultural moments. Like, you know, like we're watching sports, and so people are talking about like trans people in sports or something like that, and not kind of understanding that people respond to values more than facts, right? Mm-hmm. And so like you're saying, well, no, actually Kamala doesn't have a policy for non-binary prisoners. Like, what are you talking? Who cares? Right? And more, it should just be like, hey, yeah, Kamala doesn't want the government to fucking define who you are. That's crazy. Why would we let the government allow you to tell you who you are? But even when they do
try to do like legal definitions, that's where the controversy around the fucking term birthing person came from, is because we need legal definitions in some instances. And then the right is just like, what do you mean birthing person? Yeah. They hate women.
And then they're able to, even though no one's talking specifically, like they always are successfully able to pretend like all Democrats, especially elected Democrats, are talking about birthing persons, when it's like, name one person, one Democrat elected that has said anything about this,
and
it's zero people.
Well, yeah, they
let
the GOP kind of define the things that they do. Like a lot. This is really funny. Democrats buy into that kind of.
They do
buy-in, right? Like that's why you had all of those like moderate Democrats saying like, we shouldn't have gone so hard for trans people, and like, you know, like. Trans people are like, what the fuck do you mean by that? Like, no one went hard for us at all. Like,
this was the least hard they have ever gone.
Yeah, it's like, but it's like because the Republicans kind of defined and like saying like, you know, Kamala shouldn't have used Latinx language. Like, well, I've got some great news for you then, buddy. Like, she didn't. You know, right? But it's like
not once.
When you let them kind of define, you know, what the terms are, right?
That's the fucking thing, is that the Democrats are always playing by the Republicans' rules.
Yeah, they're
Absolutely.
responding all the time. But yeah, to kind of like bring it back into this book, like I think like one of the things that we kind of have to learn from a lot of this is that like our cultural values are like received, right? And the way that they play out sometimes are explicit, like these like Republican ads, right? But a lot of times they're implicit, right? Like the values that a team has, right, or a football player has, and the way that they kind of discuss those values, and the way that that's kind of demonstrated. Like in the book, I talk about kind of the relationship that football has to military recruitment. It's actually a really close relationship. So the Department of Defense pays the NFL, or paid the NFL. There was like a huge controversy about this. Paid the NFL like hundreds of thousands of dollars to do military recruitment stuff, including like flyovers for games and running ads and holding. So they hold swearing in ceremonies at halftime of football games. It's like you don't see it on TV as much. It just occurs.
That's a sensible part of the book that you're working on, is like the tie-in with the military industrial complex.
Yeah. And so like when that relationship kind of tightens, and this goes like all the way back, like we didn't used to play the national anthem before football games, like that occurred after World War One, and for like a brief moment, and then they stopped, and then after World War II, Kennedy was like, we got to fucking fight communism, and so to do that, we got to sing the national goddamn anthem. Right.
I mean, as long ago as I can remember, when I started getting into politics, when I was like 16, 17, around that age, one of the first things, like I've stated millions of times, I'm not a sports person, but one of the things I always knew about sports is how intertwined that all was. I was always very critical of like, why do we say the Pledge of Allegiance before a football game? Why is there like jets flying above stadiums to do this show and dance? Why are we like thanking the military industrial complex before these sports games start? It's been something like present in like, and as someone who doesn't really watch sports, for me it's very bizarre and very off-putting, and especially the like overlap of this military industrial complex and trying to getting vulnerable people to join it, whether it be people in sports or people in high school that don't know what they want to do.
Yeah. And so it is like very closely tied together. And this is like the cultural production that I think like we need to be really aware of, right? That like when you spend like, there's only like halftimes are only 12 minutes in football games. Until you get to the Super Bowl, then they're like a fucking hour or whatever. But when you spend like a good chunk of the only 12 minutes you have to dedicate it to the military, you're creating like these cultural signals about what the military is, right? Football is designed, I shouldn't say designed, but one of the appeals of football is that there's a sense of community. Like you're all in the stadium together, you're all cheering for the same team. For a brief moment on a Sunday, you all have the same values. It's actually awesome. I love it. But part of that is the sense of community gets extended to stuff like the military. When I go to Vikings games, every halftime they have like, this week's, military, like hometown hero, I think is what they call it. And they isolate like a member of the military who performed. Sometimes it's not even like that heroic of an act. It's like, I'm glad you saved that cat, but like, why are we spending this much time on it?
Cook that war hero's ass, Arif.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Fuck that cat.
But it's like, hey, we only got like 12 minutes. I mean, the cat's fine. That's been established. No, but like, but like they spend a lot of time in there, and so like it create like, so we're in this community. We've got this sense of community together, and then how do you serve your community? Well, instead of like making sure that your neighbors are taken care of, instead of honoring people who go out into the community and like clean up trash or feed people or, offer pro bono legal services or any number of other things that are like very much, helping the community, it's military service. It's, joining an organization whose like dedicated goal is to like kill brown people. Like that's the best way to serve the community. That's a hometown hero, is the person like in Afghanistan, or I guess not anymore, but like, in a black site in Afghanistan. and so like, and that's kind of how it anchors a lot of its cultural values. And that's just kind of how it's worked throughout history, is that like a lot of these sports, like as they grow as institutions, people who have like control over the levers of power understand its cultural control and find ways to kind of implement it.
A moment for me that felt like there was going to be a cultural shift in the world of specifically football, but just sports in general, was the like Colin Kaepernick moment where he started doing these kneeling protests. But of course, it was a very constant thing where he would do this, and he had like very popular support in like, you know, more like, I don't want to say they're not establishment spaces, but Democrats, you know, wouldn't really stand up for him in any public way. Well, every single Republican in the world wanted to kill him. They wanted they wanted him out of the world.
Let's rewind that a little bit first, just in case, because, you know, I'm sure most people do, but in case people miss that, because I'm sure don't have a whole ton of football heads on the Western Kabuki audience. Arif, do you want to just walk us through Colin Kaepernick, what happened and all that?
Yeah, no, for sure. So Colin Kaepernick I think he was drafted in 2012 behind a player named Alex Smith, who'd like been failing a lot. That part's not important. But, you know, he got drafted at the San Francisco 49ers. And as the 49ers...
The most Hitlerian team in the NFL,
which is crazy considering like where they are, but like, yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need you guys to elaborate a little bit on what makes them Hitlerian.
Well, think about like, it's like the same question as like what makes Silicon Valley Hitlerian, and you just kind of like dovetail all of that together.
They also have a defensive end,
Nick Bosa.
Nick Bosa, who
he's maybe the most
Donald
MAGA
Trump
player
dance.
in the NFL.
Yeah, as a celebration. Was it? He didn't do a pick six. Was it a sack? What did he do the Trump dance for? I don't remember.
It was a sack, and then also after a game where someone else was named the player of the game or something like that. As that player was getting interviewed, he popped on screen with like a "Make America Great Again" hat and pointed at it. Interestingly, the hat was not red and white; it was like white and gold lettering, which made it very difficult for the camera to pick it up. But everyone kind of figured it out after half a second. So intended.
It's very funny too, because in the post game presser, they were asking him like, "Well, like, do you want to talk about that?" And all of a sudden, he got real quiet.
And he's like,
"No, that's that."
I'm here to talk football. I said what I
said, or whatever. Yeah,
right.
Let's stick to sports, right? Yeah, like we're the assholes.
But yeah, so the 49ers, they draft Colin Kaepernick right in 2012, and Alex Smith, again, like he'd been failing for a while, and he's having now the best year of his career. Right now, Jim Harbaugh is the head coach of the 49ers. And Smith is doing like extremely well. Like people are like, "Oh my God, Alex Smith is the guy that we thought he was like 5-6 years ago." But then he goes down to injury, and so Colin Kaepernick enters the scene. And at the time, he might be the most athletic quarterback in the NFL. Cam Newton hadn't been drafted yet. We're like Lamar Jackson's a baby at this point. Like this guy is an insanely good athlete. He runs like a gazelle. It's incredible stuff, and he's got an arm that's so powerful that. At one point, like Randy Moss is on this 49ers team. So anyone who doesn't know, Randy Moss might be the greatest receiver in NFL history. If he's not, he's top 3. I don't want to argue about it. But he's incredible, right? And he has played with some incredible quarterbacks. Tom Brady's one of them. But notably, he has played with 2 quarterbacks who are known to have some of the strongest arms, throw the ball the fastest, in NFL history, Dante Culpepper and Jeff George. Like he's caught passes from them. And he mentioned, and at this point, you know, Randy Moss is like 36 or something like that. And he mentions to the media, like, he has to adjust how he catches the ball to Colin Kaepernick because he might break his fingers with how fast the ball is going. Kaepernick is really fucking talented, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. As a Seattle Seahawks fan, I fucking hated him. I hated him. We had the most gnarly duels for years. Yeah.
And you know, for context, this is a Seattle Seahawks team that had the best defense in the NFL, and Colin Kaepernick was still like a nightmare. It's just, it's frustrating to watch a guy that gave us more. So
we're getting into football dipshit territory, but it needs to be stated: the Seahawks during this time went on to just crucify the most productive offense in NFL history in the Super Bowl, the Denver Broncos that year, and yet the NFC Championship game was a nail biter with Colin Kaepernick and those 49ers. That was actually like really the Super Bowl that year. Like that's how good that 49ers team was. We're talking about one of the best defenses in modern history versus statistically one of the best offenses of all time. And Colin Kaepernick was better.
Yeah, he was just so fun to watch. And so he's this exciting player. It's not just that he's good, it's that he's exciting. He's playing a different brand of football. And so, you know, people are attached to him. They don't win, that year. Obviously, like you mentioned, the Seahawks end up going to the Super Bowl. Yeah. I love that, like, the play that's iconic of that year against the 49ers is called the tip. It's beautiful.
Yep.
But
one of the greatest moments in sports history.
Yeah, it's incredible. But like this establishes like how critical of a figure Colin Kaepernick is. The 49ers end up doing something that I think not very many people expect. They trade away Alex Smith to the Kansas City Chiefs. And so they essentially they install Colin Kaepernick as the starting quarterback. They believe in him. He's going to be the guy. And then he gets injured and they're having a bad season. Harbaugh decides to leave to go to Michigan to win a national championship there instead. Sure. And so now we've got like like, why not? Right. So now we've got like a series of coaches with the 49ers, and they don't do a very good job of taking advantage of what Colin Kaepernick can do. And also Colin Kaepernick himself is just struggling. And so we're now a couple of seasons removed from his like 2012, 2013, 2014 performances that are just outstanding. And now we're hitting 2015, really bad year, 2016. It gets so bad. So I think, was it Chip Kelly, I think, is the head coach at this point? This is like their third head coach since Harbaugh.
The Jed York shuffle.
Yeah, it's just bad. Like they brought in is it Carl from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, the neighbor? That, I swear to God, that was one of the coaches. Like look up a pic, like Google Jim Tomsula and tell me that's not fucking Carl.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stone Cold Lock of the Week of the Century. But yeah, like it's like it's bad scenes is what I'm getting at. And Kaepernick is struggling. He's getting injured a lot.
Also like the Seahawks are still very good at this point, and then this is like during the ascendance of the Rams also. So like
so the Rams get a new head coach who like knows what he's doing. The Rams get a head coach that forever alters the face of football for the next decade. It's actually quite annoying. But like because you play your in-division rivals twice a year and everybody else once a year or less, it matters like that the Rams are very good and the Seahawks are very good.
Best for a while, the hottest division.
Yeah, like easily. Yeah. The Cardinals are also there too. It's nice of them.
Sure.
And the 49ers are just really struggling after having a lot of recent success. And so Kaepernick gets benched and they go through a couple quarterbacks. They go through a guy, his name is Blaine Gabbert, who's about as much of a joke as his name would kind of suggest. He's bad.
That who he was originally benched for, was Blaine Gabbert?
Yeah. Which that's
Christ, dude.
Yeah, talk about tough scenes, man. That's fucked. Like
that actually feels way more racist now that I know that it's Blaine Gabbert.
But I mean, fair enough. But we're in the 2016 preseason, and Kaepernick right now is too injured to start, and we're not even sure that if he were healthy he would start. So Blaine Gabbert is like the likely starter at the beginning of the season. During the preseason, Colin Kaepernick is like sitting on the sidelines while everyone else is standing for the national anthem that they're playing, right? And one reporter notices it. I wish I remembered their name because like this is very clearly like a huge moment.
Biggest story in modern NFL, probably.
Yeah. And just like kind of idly asks like, hey, so because Kaepernick wasn't advertising this, right? He's the backup quarterback and he's sitting on the sideline right there. It's like not that, but you have to be like literally like in the press box searching around to notice this. And as someone who's been in the press box a lot, I got to tell you, a lot of fucking people in the press are doing the same thing. They're standing up during the national anthem and singing the goddamn song. Very few people are doing their job during the national anthem. It's a pet peeve of mine if you can't tell. But like someone was, props to them. And they asked Colin Kaepernick like afterwards, like, hey, so you weren't like standing for the national anthem. What's up? Is it like your injury? Like, are you not allowed to stand? If you're not allowed to stand, why were you in uniform? Like, what's going on? And he explains that he can't stand for a national anthem that represents a country that condones, police violence against black bodies. And which is like, oh fuck. Like we're on it now, right? It's like what, a year after Ferguson, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That was in 2015. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're in the shit, right? Like we've seen We've seen a couple of NBA players. We've seen like the whole WNBA, do like this kind of stuff. This is before Freddie Gray. But yeah, like he's throwing down the gauntlet essentially. I don't think he thought of it that way. He was just explaining himself. It wasn't like this meteoric thing. He was just like, no, ethically, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. It was kind of like the explanation.
That's really important. And that's something that that never goes reported when we talk about the story, is that he's like kind of casted as, oh, he's just look at me, Colin Kaepernick, trying to make it about himself because he's been benched or whatever. That's not the case. He really didn't go look for this fight. He was just doing his own thing.
Yeah. And so like a lot of people are talking about this. I'm trying to remember. So a lot of people are talking about this, and there's like this discussion about how it's like disrespectful to the military to like sit on the sidelines during the national anthem. Sure. This brings us back to like the cultural production of the military. And so there's like this, which is very stupid. But at one point, a teammate of his, who's also like a retired Army Green Beret, Nate Boyer, says, well, okay, we could do a compromise here. Like instead of like standing for the national anthem, you could do what me and my brothers do.
Seattle Seahawk.
Yeah. Sorry, not teammate, but like, he was like, we could do that. You can, because he's the long stepper for there. He was the long stepper for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
And he's like, you could do like what me and my brothers do.
He's a vet, so yeah, he's saying this is the respectful way.
Is to kneel during the national anthem.
Yeah,
that's
right. I forgot about that part of it.
The compromise, like that, like that's the thing, right? Like a veteran was like, this is how you honor the military in the military, is that you kneel. And so he's like, yeah, I could do that because I don't want to like disrespect the military. Yeah, there's like limits to everyone's activism, right? Sorry. But like, my intention is not to like disrespect the military or even to suggest that the United States is not like a land of promise, but he's like essentially hearkening back to, I think it was like Frederick Douglass, right? Who like refuses to sing the national anthem, and he explains that like, how can you sing for a country that doesn't sing for you, kind of thing. And
I mean, this whole thing also just goes to show, like we were talking about before, Republicans are really, really, really fucking good at messaging.
Yes.
Even when it's not against Democrats specifically, because he was like, no, this is because of police violence. And Republicans are like, oh, so you hate America.
You hate America. Right. And no one was
that's
like,
not what we were talking about before. That is not the same discussion.
Goddamn playbook since 9/11, dude.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, yeah, and no one was like, "Hey, isn't it weird that you've connected America to police violence?" Let's talk about. No one thought that. But yeah,
that would have been too smart to bring up at the time.
Right? Yeah. And so he starts kneeling, and a couple of other players do, but it's mostly him. He starts kneeling. Like Malcolm Jenkins and Eric Reed, like they're also kneeling, but it's not a ton of players. And this causes like all kinds of fucking problems. The Steelers are like, Mike Tomlin is afraid of taking, which I love Mike Tomlin as a coach. I don't want to but he's afraid of taking a side essentially. And mind you, he's in a tough spot. There are not a ton of black head coaches in the NFL. It's a difficult spot to be in when it comes to, issues of race. And so he doesn't want to be put into this tough spot. And so he says, okay, well, we're just not going to be out there for the national anthem. So no one can make a statement, but we're not going to force anyone to stand. And then everyone got mad at that too, right? So yeah, the NFL was considering a rule.
Doesn't matter. So that was a weird era too. It didn't matter what you did or didn't do. People were pissed. And that's why Republicans win, because the Steelers just don't go out there. By the way, advertisers are pulling out. This is a fucking conundrum. Alarms are going off for the NFL right now. Russell Wilson.
Which, by the way, the Steelers are one of the two teams that have like military veterans. Like one is the Seahawks with Nate Boyer. The other one's Alejandro Villanueva, the starting left tackle for the Steelers. And people are like, yeah, the Steelers are un-American. The Pittsburgh Steelers are un-American.
Yeah. Russell Wilson has the idea that they're all going to go out there, and the Seattle Seahawks, instead of kneeling, they're all going to go out there and link arms. And that was seen as disrespectful somehow. Like there's nothing that you can do to satisfy.
It's not even like they know it's not disrespectful. It's just the fact that it's being brought up or talked about in any capacity to them is a problem, and they cannot have that. So they have to take it on in any way that they can. And that's the way they do it. And especially because a lot of these owners, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these sports team owners typically lean to the right. So of course they
gosh.
are being pulled by whatever even larger donors, the people that donate to them, their teams, to whatever world they're in. That's why then they will let these narratives go on.
I'm glad that you brought that up, June, because there is there's a specific connection to the MAGA movement and all of this. And I just wanted, Arif, I don't think of all the times we've ever talked about politics and football that we've ever discussed this. Donald Trump specifically, Donald Trump specifically, I don't know if anybody knows this.
I know what this is already. Yeah.
He wanted to buy the Bills and he was denied. And so he
deeply
seizes
wanted
upon this moment. He deeply, more than anything. And I don't think Roger Goodell was a commissioner back then. I don't know who was, but who was a commissioner when Donald Trump was
Pete
denied?
Rosell?
Was it Rosell?
It might have been.
Whoever it was fucked America over harder than anybody that's ever fucked over America.
You should have just fucking let him. Yeah.
Just if Donald Trump was just allowed to own the Bills, we would live in such a nice timeline right now because the Bills would be trash. Donald Trump would be in the media talking shit about everybody all the time, and he would never become president. So I guess I just wanted your take on that, Arif. And do you think that because we obviously know he's like the pettiest person possible.
I think that absolutely played a role. And I for people who are like unfamiliar with the story, it is really difficult for me to emphasize how much Donald Trump wanted to own a football team. Like it has been essentially like a life's passion of his. It is like
it's
if
like
you
Homer
rank
wanting
like
to own the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, like if you rank like the top 5 things Donald Trump wants, a football team is one of them. Like it's like he ruined a football league because of how much he wanted an NFL team. There's a whole ass documentary about it called Small Potatoes, Who Killed the USFL? And the conclusion of the documentary is Donald fucking Trump. The USFL alternate football league that wanted to compete during the spring, which we see this pop up every so often. The XFL is kind of the most famous example of that recently, which is they're now the UFL because they combined with another spring football league, and that one actually seems like it might be working out. Who knows? But various spring football leagues pop up because there's no football being played in the spring, and so there's no competition. And so if you can, put together an exciting enough football product, people might watch it. And the USFL was maybe one of the best shots that we had at it. And so we had a bunch of teams. I think Burt Reynolds owned a team. It was like the Bandits or something like that.
That makes sense. As in Smokey and.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there's like a bunch of them, and they were having some solvency issues. It's very difficult to own a football team. It turns out it's quite an expensive affair. And so like checks are bouncing and stuff like that. And so they need to bring in like new owners with a lot more money. Donald Trump shows up and he's like, hey, do you want a team in New York? I could do that for you. And so they're like, yeah, fuck yeah. Are you kidding? Yeah, absolutely. So he starts the New York, New Jersey Generals. Yes, the name is New York/New Jersey Generals. And they
very Trumpian.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he did that bullshit.
Yeah. And he starts like just moving money around to bring in stars. I think is that where Herschel Walker went, I want to say. But like
was Doug Flutie on the
so Doug I don't know if Doug Flutie, because Doug Flutie is a CFL guy. But a different Bills quarterback, Jim Kelly, was a USFL quarterback.
That was Jim Kelly. Okay, Jim
and
Kelly. And
so was Steve Young. They have like legitimate talent. Like Steve Young, in my opinion, is the most underrated quarterback in NFL history. He might be a top 5 quarterback of all time. And he played in the USFL. Jim Kelly is a Hall of Famer as well. He played in the USFL. Having enough money to entice these college kids to, instead of going to the NFL, going to the USFL was a big part of their strategy. So Donald Trump becomes like really important to this league. And then he starts telling the league what to do because he knows he's got the biggest dick in the room. And so he's just going to start telling them what to do. And the thing is, Donald Trump is not a good business person. He just is not. Mm-hmm. He's really good at marketing. He's really good at a lot of elements of business. But in terms of like strategy, he's not particularly great at it. And he decides that he wants to do what the AFL did way back in 1960, which is merge with the league and absorb some USFL teams into the NFL, which would allow him to backdoor into having NFL ownership. This worked for the AFL, and before that, it worked for the AAFC. And so he moves the USFL to the fall, where it gets absolutely dominated by the NFL. It gets crushed. No one wants to watch the USFL during the NFL season. That's crazy. And then Donald Trump is like, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted, because this allows us to sue the NFL for monopolistic practices. And so they sue the NFL for violating antitrust law. There are laws that protect sports from antitrust law. They typically apply to baseball more than the NFL. So he's suing the NFL for violating antitrust law in the hopes that the NFL will settle and absorb the New York, New Jersey Generals and some other teams he doesn't care about into the NFL. And what's great about this is at the conclusion of this is that the jury agrees that Donald Trump is correct, that the NFL is engaging in monopolistic practices, illegal monopolistic practices, and the judgment that they hand out is 1 cent, trebled because of the nature of the law, so it's 3 cents now. And so he received a check for 3 cents from the NFL, and that was the end of it. Like no one absorbed it. So he's been mad at the NFL.
Do you know
forever.
how pissed off he was when he got a check for fucking 3 cents?
I wish I was in that room. Incredible. Oh my god.
Yeah. And so later he tries to buy the Buffalo Bills, and this is where the NFL does extraordinary vetting financially. They spend months poring over.
You can be a racist. You can have sexual assault charges. Nobody cares about those things really, but you have to have money to own an NFL team.
And so the NFL, like you have to have a certain amount of liquid money up front, typically 30%, and you have to be able to pay out the ownership franchise cost over essentially the course of a couple of years in cash, right? So you have to have liquid money available onto you. You can't just be a billionaire with a net worth of a billionaire, right? Like Elon Musk had to finance his purchase of Twitter, right? You can't finance your purchase of an NFL team. It's not allowed. So you have to have liquid money. You also need to make sure that your income, however you make money, which billionaires don't call it income, I don't fucking care, dividends, whatever. The way that you make money cannot primarily be projected to come from an NFL team. So, which would prevent you from being insolvent. So like the USFL had a lot of problems paying players, right? Like they would race to the bank because if you were the first to the bank, your check would cash. If you were last, it wouldn't, right? Like that's how bad it was.
Just like construction workers.
Yeah. And they would make a game of it, right? Like they would race each other down the highway and like they would carpool together. Like it was just crazy. Which it's just like when you think about like Burt Reynolds and the Bandits and Smokey the Bandit, like it's very funny actually. But like they can't have that happen in the NFL. And so you have to have a way to have money come in, not just liquid money. And you need to be solvent in this way and all of this, right? Trump knows this, and so he moves a bunch of money around, especially in his Swiss bank accounts, in order to make it appear as if he has a much higher net worth. You know, he does like these tax tricks, like declaring losses, like which we were later treated to in 2015, 2016, declaring particular losses and declaring particular gains, shifting depreciation around. I don't know all the tricks. I'm not, an accountant. But he moves a bunch around so that it seems like he has a lot of money, and the NFL catches him. They're like, okay, look, you may have some financial wizards, but we have the financial wizards, and we have figured this out. So no, you cannot buy an NFL team like this. So they don't reject Donald Trump because he's politically exposed, because obviously at the time he's not, right? They reject him because he's not rich enough to own an NFL team, and in addition to the 3 cents, I can't imagine how mad that guy must have been when he received the judgment. You're too brokey, get out of here.
I mean, before he became president, he was kind of being owned by everyone all the time. Like famously, every person just walloped on him at all times. Famously, the Barack Obama, sadly, it's aged the worst it could have possibly ever aged, where he was like talking at like some dinner where he was like, Donald Trump, you'll never be president.
Dinner.
Right. Yeah. It's just like back in the day, Trump was being walloped and hit and just slammed all the time.
He's getting crushed.
Yeah.
So Trump now being in a position of power over the NFL must have been like the most delicious fucking dessert he's ever eaten. Which makes sense. He doesn't eat good food. But
he wanted the NFL to suffer. So like I think that this outrage would have happened to some degree or another anyway. But if you don't
Yeah, he wanted to twist a knife for sure.
He wanted to twist the knife. That's why we had to deal with all that bullshit for a year and a half.
Yeah, like he makes Mike Pence go to a Colts game. Mike Pence, former governor of Indiana, right? So Indianapolis Colts. He makes Mike Pence go to a Colts game so that when the national anthem plays, Mike Pence can stand for it and then leave as soon as he sees a player kneeling. Like that's how stupid this is. And so like, all of this is happening. And that's like the fever pitch moment of it. The 49ers do, I want to say to their credit, they do stand behind Kaepernick for the most part for this season. But Kaepernick is like not playing super well. At some point he does end up playing because Blaine Gabbert is just like that bad. Like you can't like look your fans in the face and be like, we're trying to win and then fucking put Blaine Gabbert out there. It's just like not gonna work.
That's the Shane Gillis joke that the NFL football does defeat racism eventually.
You're right.
Blaine Gabbert does have to go at some point.
The Shane Gillis segregation skit of like the racist high school football coach is so fucking funny. But the last person or the first person to be canceled for an Asian joke, I think is what Shane Gillis says. But they put Kaepernick out there and he's just not doing well. And the thing that makes this really complicated is that you could very easily make the argument that it's not his fault, right? Like, and there's like a lot of ways that football fans will cope with a quarterback not playing well, and they'll make up reasons that fall apart after scrutiny. And it's just like, look, I understand that you as a Bears fan have not seen a good quarterback literally this century. Like,
you will hear a lot of these on 60-Minute Drill, by the way.
Right? Yeah.
These coping mechanisms.
Right. But like sometimes they're like kind of real. Sometimes they're really good explanations. Like this 49ers team, they don't have any wide receivers. Their offensive line is no longer as good as it was. In fact, it was actually kind of bad. And so he doesn't have the support he needs. And though he's not creating yards, he's actually avoiding interceptions. So his touchdown interception ratio, which is one of the statistics that football fans use, is actually extremely good, shockingly good for a team that's not, performing very well. And so you have like these contradicting pieces of data. You've got all this context that kind of exculpates him. And so it ends up becoming a much more difficult thing. It kind of reminds me of the Tim Tebow stuff from 2011, where Tim Tebow is objectively a bad quarterback, but the team is winning. And so you have like this really polarizing argument where you kind of understand where both sides are coming from, and that magnifies it, right? Because if somebody is just wrong, that kind of kills the conversation. But if there's like a reason for, us to, concretely and strongly hold these competing views, you can have it, and then you're throwing, more gas on the fire when you have like this controversy about race in the United States, right? And so Colin Kaepernick, the guy who's now the face of, protesting against police violence in like 2016, fairly or unfairly, is playing in a way that makes it very difficult to determine if he's very good or very bad. And he very recently had an NFL changing, like an epic changing season for the NFL. Taking a team all the way to the Super Bowl and having this really remarkable season. His play is one reason why people were comfortable drafting Lamar Jackson later on, right? Like him and Cam Newton was drafted technically the year before, but he didn't become big until 2015. The nature of that play is polarizing, but they eventually do bench Kaepernick, and now we have to figure out what to do because Kaepernick, after one of his best seasons, had signed a long-term contract with the 49ers, and so they're stuck with the amount of guaranteed money that they offered him. So the nature of the NFL is that there's like a salary cap, right? And so that you can only pay players so much every year. That's supposed to provide equity across the league. As I explained in other parts of the book, all it does is depress wages for the benefit of ownership.
I know we're coming up, but we're actually over the hour now. But to round this off, I do want to talk about the economics of it to finish this off in a second.
But yeah. So like the way the nature of the salary cap works is that if you cut a player who has a lot of guaranteed money, you are now liable for all of it all at once for that year's salary cap. And so it's pretty untenable to be able to field a whole team when you've got all of this money wrapped up. And so they have to trade him or eat the salary cap. And they try to trade him to the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos essentially lowball the trade, so that makes it impossible. But the thing is, the Denver Broncos say that they'll offer him a new contract, and he says no because the contract would get him paid less than if he does nothing at all. Everybody would say no to that. Like, I could just sit on the bench and be cut and make more money, or I could go to this other team and make a lot less money. And so that complicates the conversation because now people are like, oh, he turned down a contract he doesn't really want to play, kind of stuff. So that is a big part of the conversation about race that really kind of sticks in the NFL for a while until 2020. With all of the uprisings across, like, so you have the Breonna Taylor stuff, and of course, in Minneapolis, right? Like, it's just like, when you've got like the George Floyd thing happening in Minneapolis, it's just an overwhelming shift in public opinion about the nature of police violence. And so in this part of the book, I talk about how the NFL tends to co-opt things when it goes to the point where they can no longer be in opposition to those things. And so they turn this conversation of police violence into a conversation about generalized kind of racism, racial injustice, race outcomes. And so you have this conversation about police violence that turns into donations for STEM programs for like urban youth. And it's like, okay, but like now this programmer is getting choked out as opposed to like as opposed to like a cab driver. Like, how is that better? What the fuck?
Yeah.
But like the NFL, so like I talk a lot about kind of the co-option of the NFL and how whenever a social cause rises to the point where the NFL has to flip sides on it, they do it in a way that disempowers kind of the structural questioning that can occur inside of that protest and reaffirms the system that we exist in, which like charity often does, but like the NFL
and like a lot of these organizations run by very similarly like wealthy people, which I guess is most of these sort of organizations are always incentivized to try to quell that outrage or that movement that's starting. Like that's entirely the goal at the end of the day too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Arif, I feel like we could go easily another hour on this, but we are over. We're about an hour and 10 or whatever.
No, you're great.
No,
this is
not
fascinating.
You. We were just
I would love
interested.
to.
That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aside, if you want to hear more of this, first of all, I'll do my pitch first. We do have 60-minute drill with Ed Zitron, where we do talk about this kind of thing with some regularity. Besides that, where can our listeners find you?
So you can find me. I'm over, of course, I'm still on X because I have to promote my work. So Twitter. Why did I call it X? Fuck you. Jesus. I've never done that in my life. I can't believe I just did that now.
That's pretty wild. Let's not have this guy back on the show. Okay.
So yeah, fair. That's fair. No, so I'm on, I'm going to keep dead naming Twitter. No, I'm on Twitter at Arif Hasan NFL. I'm also on Blue Sky at arif.bsky.social. You can find me there or at my website, wideleft.football. Sorry, I'm gonna beat myself up for like the next week for saying X. This is crazy.
You're fine. You're fine.
Noted racist Arif Hasan.
Yeah, no, there we go. But yeah, Wide Left Football. I've got so the piece where I make fun of Democrats for essentially 10,000 words. That's over there. It's about neoliberalism and it's not even about
a little bit about some of that stuff at the top of this episode.
Yeah. So yeah, that's over a piece about neoliberalism. I talk about gambling in sports. I talk about politics in sports a lot.
God, I have so much that I wish we had more time because gambling in sports that has been something I've been thinking so much about a lot lately.
We did a whole last episode on that.
Yeah, we got. Check that out.
I have to listen to it then, and everyone else should too.
But yeah, so a ton of stuff that's just pure politics, some stuff that is the intersection of politics and sports, some of that's just culture in sports, and some of it's just straight sports writing. Like I just talk about like why the Vikings defense is good, which is fun. So check that over at wideleft.football.
We play you next week, by the way. We're gonna get our asses beat.
Probably.
Okay, my personal appeal to the Western Kabuki audience. I love Arif's work. Please do check out wideleft.football. Please do subscribe if you can afford it. Arif does great work and it is worth reading. So any other housekeeping, anything that we've got to plug?
I don't think so at the moment.
No, I don't think
we
so.
sold out of our pre-sale for our live show.
Which amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like I not to like, I don't know, talk us like up, but like I knew that like we would sell out pretty quickly, but we sold out pretty quickly, and there's a lot of interest in that live show. And I think we're gonna set it to, and maybe it'll be live at this point by the time this episode comes out, but it'll be at public general sale at some point. So just keep your eyes out for that. I'm not sure. I think you had a specific date in mind, Caleb, but I can't recall at this.
January 1st.
January 1st. So yeah, keep your eyes open for January 1st, because if the pre-sale that was only available to us, like the Patreon subscribers, sold out within like 45 minutes, like you're going to want to act fast for that first show in March.
Yeah, that's going to go quick. There's a couple of other things that you're going to see us do that we launch alongside of that on January 1st. If you want to do like an e-ticket or some other things that we're going to do, and also keep in mind, hopefully we're still working out the details. It's very difficult and expensive to do tours, but some other cities will be launched shortly after Chicago, hopefully as well.
Absolutely. We'll keep everyone updated about all of those.
I've been bugging Caleb about adding a Minneapolis show. I don't think it makes sense for any of you financially, but it makes sense for me personally. So
it makes sense for me because I've wanted to go to Minneapolis for a long time, and that would be a great excuse to go to Minneapolis.
Chicago and Minneapolis aren't that far
outside
apart,
of the fucking airport.
But that's what I mean. It doesn't make sense financially because Chicago, like, you already got that show there. But
yeah.
Screw it.
Yeah.
One day I'll take the Amtrak out.
Hell yeah.
It seems like a really great city from the view of my cab to my hotel the one night that I didn't sleep in the airport.
So you experienced the city perfectly then.
Yeah. I ate one of the, what do you call them, Arif, the hamburgers that explode when you bite them?
The Juicy Lucy's? They rule.
Yeah. Oh. I had one of those in the airport, and it was a Prince-themed restaurant, and I was so depressed, and I'd been awake for like 36 hours. I did not enjoy my Lucy Juicy, whatever it was. So I want to do Minneapolis right.
I'm kind of disgusted that that's the name of the burger, but maybe I'm just judging too harshly.
It's like cheese in the burger, something.
Yeah, it's cheese
sauce.
inside the burger.
It's like it's like a burger calzone.
Yeah, like a gusher, a burger gusher.
It busts in your mouth, is what it sounds like.
All right, we're done.
Oh yeah, it spooges fucking all over. You gotta be like careful. You got,
I didn't know you were a freak like that. Damn. Okay.
When did I become the fucking crew to the show who can't handle this stuff? But seriously, guys.
Sorry, this is a podcast that had an episode about gooning, right? I want to be clear.
Two episodes. I have to say.
Before I started working on it.
Yeah, because we got so many corrections that we got wrong on the fucking first episode that we had to go back and do it.
You had technical changes to your gooning.
Yes. Yeah, we got our asses beat so hard we had to go back and do a second episode.
I think that was the first introduction of Marcos as well to the show, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, Lucy will change your life. She's really vocal.
Shout out Lucy.
Yeah, shouts out. All right. Arif, thank you so much.